Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 3 of the Just to You podcast. I'm Eric Nicole, your host, and I'm so glad you decided to join us today. Whether this is your very first time joining in on the conversation or you've been listening along since the beginning, thank you for being here. This podcast exists because of you, your stories, your courage, and your willingness to keep choosing yourself, even when it's not easy. The Just Do You podcast is a safe space for authentic, unscripted conversations that connect us, inspire us, and remind us of who we are at our core. Together, we're going to explore confidence, voice truth, and what it means to step fully into what I call the Just Do You sweet spot, that place where you are living honestly, intentionally, and unapologetically. This new season is about growth, reflection, possibility, and community. I'll be sitting down with friends, colleagues, community leaders, and influencers who are willing to share their journeys, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. We'll laugh, we may shed a few tears, but in the end, we're going to continue to remind one another that none of us is walking this path alone. So, are you ready? Great, let's do this. Welcome to season 3 of the Just Do You podcast. All right, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I am so glad that you are here with us today. It's been an interesting day, and I've been reflecting a lot on what we're seeing in the news. And it occurred to me that there are some journalists that actually just report the news. And then there are others that really make you feel the people behind the stories. And that's exactly what our guest today does. And his name is Valle. And Jay is an award-winning New York City-based journalist whose work centers around community voices, accountability, and real-world impact. In a moment when so many LGBTQ people in the community feel targeted, isolated, and afraid, this kind of journalism isn't just important, it's essential. So for nearly 5 years at NBC News, Jay reported on national investigations, LGBTQ policy coverage, powerful human stories that connected lived experiences with real change. His investigative reporting on robberies actually earned him a 2024 GLAAD Media Award as the story focused around the attacks on the LGBTQ community. I'm really grateful to share the conversation with you today. So I'm going to ask you to give a warm welcome to Jay Valle. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Eric. How are you today?
I'm great. It's so nice to be sitting down with you today. We were sharing a little bit before I hit record, and I'm actually on location for one of my client events. And I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today. I think it's the perfect timing. I was so looking forward to this all week. So thank you for being here.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me and making time. Like you said, too, you're on site, but we're both making the time. And I wanted to connect with you. And it's a pleasure. It's really a
Good.
pleasure to meet you.
Good. I thank you for reaching out. So, we're going to definitely get into your work as a journalist. I want to take you back just a little bit. I like to do that with my guests because I think it really sets the tone, not only for the conversation, but many times, as I shared with you, that it really correlates and ties well into what we do in our, I'll call it adulthood. I'd like to hear a little bit about young Jay. What was young Jay like? Family, brothers, sisters, mom and dad, where'd you grow up? What was young Jay like?
Oh my goodness. First, I'll just start by saying adulting is crazy. I feel like I'm just stepping into adulthood and all that entails, which a lot of emotions, a lot of changes. But you're so right, Eric, because my upbringing actually, I think, is connected to who I am today and the work that I do. I did half my childhood in Jersey City and then the other half in South Florida. And I have a total of 6 brothers and sisters. So I was the middle and I grew up with my oldest brother and one of my youngest sisters. After my parents split, I made my move to Florida. And yeah, being the middle child, I think I was the one who was the extra loudest, but knew what he was doing. I already had a plan and I was very creative. I picked up a camera at the age of 7, I believe. And I have proof of this because I was watching some home videos this holiday season and I was stunned because 90% of all 12 tapes are all of me. And it is, I was like, who let me do this? Who let me take this camera? And these are actual tapes, like actual tapes. Anyway, my family had them digitized. And I saw a little bit of myself during that time. I saw a very high energy, loud personality. And I had, as some might say, a little sugar in my tank. Okay. It was very obvious. So obvious. I was very funky and I was a queer kid. It was obvious I was putting on shows for my family and routines with my sister. And I was narrating all of these home videos. And I think seeing that this holiday season, it really clicked for me of who I was and who I'd always been. And when I came out at 16 here in South Florida, and I came out by accident, digital realm. So my iPhone was my
Mm,
tell. My mom stumbled upon a few messages with a guy that I had been dating. And it wasn't the best experience, to be honest with you. It really tore me apart. It really just showed me a little bit of the battle that I had with my own religion as being raised Christian, a Pentecostal, and then battling with myself that want to please everyone, that
mm,
want to be the straight A student that I was, to be even more perfect for my family. And so I battled with the religion side of it and internalizing all the homophobia that I was getting on the outside. And it was just a big fight for me at that point. I mentioned the home videos because as I was watching them this holiday season with my mom for the first time,
mm.
really clicked to her, I think, and to everyone in the room watching that Jay had been like this since he was a kid. Jay had been like this since forever, really. And that was such a healing moment for me. Watching home videos of yourself can be embarrassing, but I was embarrassed and then also crying because I was like, wow,
Mhm.
this is some of the relationships and people in my life that were in that video no longer are for reasons that they don't agree with me. They don't
Mhm.
agree with my life per se. And so it definitely really heightened a lot of the thoughts in my head on who I am today and why I do what I do today. And really, to wrap it up a little bit for you, after coming out again at 16, I packed my bags. And once I tossed that cap for high school graduation, I also tossed my bags in a car and I left home early. I moved in with my high school sweetheart. And then I pursued my undergrad and I went to nursing school, which was very wild because nursing was just on the books for me. I believed in structure, making sure I had a plan and I was going to get this. At this point, I was like, I'm on my own. I got to get it going. I got to get things right. And I pursued nursing for 2 months and then I dropped out, Eric, because it was just not for me. And in my life, I've always been taught if you drop out, you're a failure. So I was just devastated because
Mm.
nursing school was it. I wanted
Yeah.
to help people, I wanted to take care of people. And then around that time, I was inspired by my current partner, almost 10 years, who's a musician, actor, and just a creative all around. And he said, what do you want to do? And I
Mm.
said, I want to tell people stories. And so I took a year off, did some independent work, freelance, and then I went back to school for journalism and communications. And the rest was history. I started freelancing here in Miami. And then unfortunately, the job market was down during the pandemic. And that was about the time I was able to finish up my degree. But I was actively working, but there were no jobs. I had 20
Mm.
plus rejections under my belt, Eric. And there's no other, I've dealt with rejection. And then this side of rejection for the job market just hits different. Feeling it is not cool. You just start
Mhm.
to feel like, did I just put my money somewhere? And eventually, I was sent an email, and that email changed my life. I got my first yes at the network
Mm.
news with NBC. I packed my bags, moved all the way to Manhattan, and worked at a 30 Rockefeller for the last 5 years. And looking back at those home videos and seeing my hurricane reports and seeing my funkiness, it all just makes sense. It was what
Mhm.
I was supposed to be doing, it's what I was born to do. And it was my connection to other people like myself, where I felt a little unheard. Now, today, I feel like I can hear people and give them the platforms they deserve to. So that was a
Yeah.
lot to consume, but that
No,
really is how it all came about.
I love hearing people's stories and journeys. Obviously, I think, like I said, 78 episodes in, I've heard quite a few of them. But I want to ask you a couple questions, which I think will also help deepen this conversation as we move forward. Middle child, six brothers and sisters. I have no idea what that's. I'm an only child. So it was just me and my mom. So I wonder, as that middle child, did you have to fight for attention? Did you find that difficult to navigate? Did that maybe why you have some of this sugar in your tank or the sparkiness that you have? Your terms, not
Yeah,
mine, but
exactly. No, that I think I kept things going in the house. I think I was always the first person
mm,
to, with the ideas, the first person to maybe speak up a bit. I was very neutral among everything else. My older brother had a very strong personality, and that inspired me to be a little more tough because I was just a little more of just let it pass. I was very, even getting bullied in middle school, and my awkwardness in my freshman year in high school all tied into me not really knowing who I was. So I think I was very timid. I'll be honest. I was
mm,
timid. Those home videos at 7 years old were like, I was the complete opposite at 13, 14. It was
sure.
just, I wasn't. And people would look back and be like, oh, but I think that kind of, I think as I started to step into who I was as a teen, I started becoming a little more outspoken, a little more assertive of who I was, enough to muster up the courage to move out and then actually
Mhm.
come out to my brother in that process, who really was just in his mind. I've known, but like also, is this happening right now? You're coming out to me. So I think the relationships in my house really changed, and then I changed as well. I think as I realized too, like, all right, I have a life to live and it's going to be my own life, despite
Mhm.
being raised in church, despite the negativity that I received on that end too. Yeah, it is interesting. Definitely different juggling
Yeah,
personalities.
it is. And I've said this many times. I've had conversations with several psychologists and coaches and other professionals on this podcast. And we've always talked about how you have to take a driving class to learn how to drive a car. And to get your driver's license, right? You have to take a test and you have to practice, and then you get the driver's license. But then you may go to Europe where you drive on the other side of the
Mhm.
road and the other side of the car, and it's like learning to walk again. And I think with raising children, we don't necessarily educate our parents well enough to be able to navigate having to deal with the differences and the uniqueness and the beauty in all of the children. And then you add on top of that the layer of religion, or you add on top the layer of generational trauma. You have a lot to unpack and a lot to navigate as a parent. And so to be responsible for six kids who are all probably very different that fall under that umbrella, it's
Mhm.
interesting to hear, right? As an only child, my mother was a teacher, and I think in her ability to be not only a voice but an ear for so many different children, it made it a little bit easier for me. Although I didn't come out
Yeah.
till I was 24, I was terrified, absolutely terrified of getting
Oh
kicked out of the
no.
house and losing family. And
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I listen, I'm a little older than you, my love. I came out when I was 24. I
Yeah.
graduated in 1984 at 18, and of course came out many years later. But it was different back then. We were coming off of this very difficult time of the HIV/AIDS crisis. I was talking
Yeah.
with somebody the other day about that, about growing up in that time frame. So there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear
Mhm.
around my child being
Right.
gay. Now it's a whole different set of circumstances, but
Yeah.
really different. And I think having that ability to, as a child, express your creativity, express your uniqueness. Again, recently interviewed somebody who's a dancer, loved to dance, got bullied because he loved to dance, made a
Mhm.
decision that he couldn't dance because he didn't want to get bullied. And so we hear that time and time
Mhm.
again. But so much of what you've done in your career, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is telling the stories of people. And we all have them. We all have
Right.
these really amazing stories and beautiful stories. And sometimes they're filled with a lot of chaos and a lot of trauma. But many times they're filled with exuberance and our expression of ourselves. And we find our way back to it in what I consider way too late in life. There's a whole chunk
I
of
hear you.
time between when we were skipping around that play yard and someone called you a you know what.
Mm.
I don't like the word, so I don't use it, but they called you an expletive and you shut down. And the next thing you know, you're
My
walking
God.
different. You're paying attention to how you speak, how you walk, how you talk. And we
You rewire yourself.
you and it's conditioning. And then
Yep.
as adults, we're in therapy or working with a life coach trying to figure out who we
Yep.
are and why we made the decisions that we make. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast was because everybody does have a story, and the journeys that we
Mhm.
take to find our authenticity and to find our true selves, not only to find it, but then to be able to express it and to be ourselves in a time where we are, in some cases, being attempted to be forced back into the
Mhm.
closet, back into hiding, or feel guilty for who we are, or feel shame. My worry is that many of the young people today who, up until a couple of years ago, had the freedom to come out and were coming out a lot earlier and
Yeah.
a lot freer, will fear. And
Yeah,
so that's why I asked the question, because I think it's important to let people know and to let our listeners know around the world who are dealing with all different types of situations in their lives and circumstances that it's important
right.
to have the freedom to just be you and to just do you,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
important.
Just to you. And kudos to you in launching this and really taking it by the horns and seeing that when I think about where this lives and in the digital realm, this is your mark in history. This is your mark in the media, the footprint of media, and it reaches who it needs to reach. I remember
Mhm.
going on YouTube when YouTube started to pick up in the early 2000s, and I was just searching in desperation for things of people like myself just
Mhm.
trying to figure it out. I didn't want a label yet. I was like, maybe I'm bisexual, maybe I'm gay. And I was searching for a voice. And Eric, I can say to you right now that you are one of those voices today, and
Thank you.
your platforms will do that for the youth,
Mhm.
can come back into the safety of putting in these headphones, just going into a corner, opening up a book, albeit whatever medium they choose, but they find solace, they find a place for themselves. And that's why the storytelling, that's why I'm on here too, telling these things. And it's so weird to be on this side being interviewed because I'm the one usually doing the interview. But then it
Okay.
really makes me tap into a lot. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, Eric, like you said too, therapy is a big thing now as an adult. I just started last year. I'm 29 right now, and it was just a different things and stigmas that come with it. And I was just, maybe I'll internalize it, but then it was to a point where I would burst into tears for no reason. And that
Right.
in my mind, I'm like, I'm focusing on all these stories and really taking in a lot of what's happening on the streets of New York with my own community, but also I'm dealing with stuff in my heart and soul. And as young Jay, little queer Jay, going through what he was going through and how he's able to really digest that today as an adult. Whoever's listening, whether you're
Mhm.
15, 35, 70, it's all connected to you.
I'm only giggling because you said that you were that you're not used to being on this side of the interview, and so there might have been a little nervousness. I was am is are nervous also interviewing an
What?
award-winning you're an
No.
award-winning NBC network news reporter, so I'm thinking this guy's going to think I'm a hack. But I'll remember
No.
coming into the season, or actually last season two, we're
Yeah.
in season three this year, which is remarkable in and of itself. But into season two, and I remember December going, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I have the strength and the fortitude to not cry through every single episode because of
Mm.
what was happening in our world. I just don't know. And I remember a friend of mine calling me and he had just listened to a particular episode and I said, hey, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I can do this. And he said to me, you helped me shift my mindset a year ago when
Mm.
I needed that mindset shift. And even if you help one person that catches the episode or catches your news story or catches the story wherever they're finding it, and it makes a difference in their life and it gives them a little bit of hope or a little bit of freedom or a little bit of courage, then we've done
Mm.
our job. And I was focusing on the numbers. I was focusing on the downloads and the how many
Mm.
countries were we in and all of those things. And I remember a coach of mine who's a podcaster, who's the one who really helped me get this launched. It was an amazing podcast. He's hundreds of episodes in and it's crazy what he's done. But he said, you can't pay attention to the numbers, can't pay attention to the ratings. You just need to know that if you helped one person, you've done your job. And
Wow.
that not only
Mm-hmm.
gave me an opportunity to step back and go, not only do I love this, and not only do
Mm.
I know that this is why I'm here, I don't get paid for this, I don't have advertisers, so I try to keep it super real. So this is a passion project.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, so important because the platforms that are out today, what we see in social media, you just started therapy. I started therapy a couple years ago to deal with a very painful divorce. What I learned over the course of that year with Brittany was life altering because I had a lot
Mm.
to unpack. And so we need those opportunities to communicate. And it's why I started the podcast. I wanted to be able to connect people. I wanted to be able to have people hear that there are other people out there, see themselves, like you said, see themselves represented, or hear something that may give them a little more confidence that they're not alone. So I
Mhm.
appreciate everything that you have done and what you went through to get there. As much as I would have loved you to be a nurse, I'm glad that you saw that wasn't for you and that you decided to follow this path because the stories that you have done, the reporting that you've done is not over. I believe that there are huge things coming for you. I think you are
Thank you.
someone who has an opportunity to, and we're going to talk about this, opportunity to do you the way that Jay wants to be done and heard. And I think that's going to make the biggest
Mhm.
difference because a lot of times, as we were talking before we got on, that reporting today is not like it was a couple years ago. So tell us a little bit, if you can, about that transition. You came out at 16, you're out, you go to college, you go to nursing school, then you find out that you want to be the storyteller. What, and that sounds strange, but it's not. It's actually
Mm.
cool, right? You're like,
The-
this is me. This is who I
Chaos.
want to be. It's chaos, but it's
Yeah.
also that little kid on the playground who wants to dance and sing and skip around, right? You've now
Oh
come
my
to this
goodness.
spot
Yeah.
where you can dance and
Hmm.
sing and skip around on your terms. But what was that like?
Mm.
What was that moment when you said, this is who I am, what I want to do? And listen, I didn't think you had the full answer because we're always growing, we're always learning, we're
Yeah.
always expanding. But what was that moment like? Did you feel a sense of freedom, a sense of justification? What was that like?
I felt like I finally was able to answer that question that we all struggle with. What was I made for? What the heck am I doing here? How can I contribute? And I think I
Mhm.
always had that. How can I connect with people? How can people connect with me? How can there was just this thing, and so the storytelling part of it really just it all clicked for me immediately.
Mhm.
And it clicked me with one particular story on the power of journalism, right? But then it
Mhm.
clicked for me internally, not even while I was in school for journalism. It really clicked like really after, as I was saying, okay, it's me now and a camera. What am I gonna do? And I'm so involved in the storytelling as to the writing, the shooting it, the being in front of the camera, being behind the camera. What's the
Mhm.
story going to look like? How I'm interviewing, the process. So all of it, it really is just it all clicked for me, and it felt. I don't know. That's such a great question because it really. I never really thought about how I felt about finding finally what it was that I want to do. I think it's a little past like this satisfaction. It's way past it. It's more I don't know. I don't think I have the words yet. I think that it just feels right in my heart. It feels right and it's fulfilling. And I think that's the big feeling there too, the fulfillment there.
But it's important, Jay, because many times when we have successes or failures, right, in life where we have ups and downs, I've always said this, I think I say it on almost every podcast, who you are is not your circumstances, right? So we may go through tough circumstances in our life, but they're
Mhm.
not who we are. It doesn't define us, but it may shift and alter our perception of ourselves. However, I think many times we have great successes in our lives or even great failures, and we don't take the time to stop, to take a breath, and to say, how am I feeling? How am
Mm.
I feeling? How does this make me feel? How did it make me feel when I got bullied in school? How did it make me
Wow.
feel when my father responded a certain way or the church responded a certain way? I think too many times we try to explain it rather than express it. And I think there's a big
Hmm.
a distinction between that explaining and expressing. How did I
Yeah.
feel? I felt sad. I felt happy. I felt joy. I felt all of those things are the core memories that we need to address and either acknowledge or thank, better term, for
Hmm.
giving us the opportunity to move forward. Because if we don't
Yeah.
feel, I know a lot of people who don't feel, they don't, and
Oh,
they
yeah. Came across a
don't feel,
few.
right? Don't feel. It's all very
Nothing.
matter of fact. Yeah, nothing.
Nada.
And you're like, whoa, that's going to be a rough road for you because it's those
Yeah.
feelings that propel us. So that's why I asked the
Yeah.
question, because that feeling then is if it's accomplishment or whatever that feeling is for you, it does propel you to that next level. Here you are in New York. When did you meet your partner? Was this before New York or after?
Oh, yeah. Before, so we're together almost 10 years. And so we
Wow.
met, yeah, we met 20, almost 2017,
Okay. Well,
2017-ish.
kudos to him for asking you. I didn't want to let this go because that was the second thing I wanted to say. Kudos to him for asking you point blank, who do you want to be? What do you want to do?
Yes. Oh my
Because you're
gosh.
not going to open that door for yourself. We just don't do
I
it. We don't sit there and
really
go,
felt
I'm going to
exactly
be.
how you said, I'm gonna do this. And he was like, what do you love? I'm like, I love video. I love storytelling. I want to tell people stories. And I was already doing it just in my own way with my own little resources. And he was just full throttle behind it. Like, go back to school. And I was like,
Mhm.
you bet your ass. And I'm like, listen, when I put my mind to something, I'll get it done and I'll do it. And I'll put 110%. And that's kind of the person I've always
Mhm.
been. When I
Right.
really love something, I will sit there and spend hours on it and just really sit on it. I'll lose sleep over passion stories and things because the first thing on my mind is that person or that thing and or what's happening in the world. Like you said, when we started this call, we were both like, ah, let's
Yeah.
just take a deep breath and
Take a
let's
deep
just
breath.
connect, you and me, Eric, in this moment in time and share these parts of our lives from the therapy side to the
Yeah.
storytelling.
But
Yeah.
Jay, you've been hurling these, I call them golden ticket moments at us during this conversation. But one of the things that I think is so important for people to realize and our listeners out there is that life does not exist in a monologue. Life only exists in a conversation between two people, right? It doesn't live inside your head. We think it does, but that's not reality. What we think in our heads, it's conversations, it's history, it's all of those things, it's excuses and reasons that we make up in our head. But the minute you speak it out into existence, out into the universe, or your partner asks you, and that conversation starts, right? The dialogue, right, between the two, not the monologue, but the dialogue is when that lives and when it gets oxygen and flame and starts to ignite and burn in us. Many times I sat quietly contemplating and having in these internal conversations. And it wasn't until I opened my mouth and I started declaring things and having conversations with what I call committed listeners, like this podcast. I
Mm,
talked about this podcast in my head for 2 years, 3 years maybe. And it wasn't until I mentioned it to my coach and he's, why aren't you just doing it? Why don't you
right.
just do the first one? So I want to
Hmm.
ask you, because I remember my first podcast, I was like, oh God, no one's going to listen to this.
Oh
What
my
was that? What
gosh.
was, you're hard on
I
yourself and you're
know. I
like,
get it. I get that though.
there's 250 million podcasts out there.
Yeah.
What was that first interview like for you? I'm curious. Or give us the backstory.
Oh
Wait,
my.
don't answer that question. Give us the backstory real quick. So you're in New York, you get this job.
Yeah.
Are you freaking out? Are you panicking? Are you like, this is so
Yeah.
exciting and you're like going for it with all your might? Like, what's
I will
happening?
give you, I will give you. So I was freelancing in Miami. So I'm
Okay.
going to give you the network level, like my reporter's notebook
Yeah,
on the job, got this big gig, first time, imposter syndrome pumping through my veins, but
sure.
adrenaline, passion, and wanting to just kill it. They hired me as a writer first. I came in
Mm,
through, and so I was writing for NBC Out, the LGBTQ vertical
mm,
that unfortunately does not exist today, but it was a location just for LGBTQ news. And so I was like, this is perfect. I can tell these stories. And so I think for me, one of those interviews, oh my gosh, I would say was when I really had that moment of OMG was that investigative story that we you mentioned up top on the mysterious disappearance and murder of 25-year-old Julio Ramirez, the gay social worker who was bar hopping in Manhattan. I initially, the first interview that I did was with his brother. And so that for me was just, oh my goodness, you really have to separate yourself and try to hear their story while wiping tears. And my nerves were like on fire because I was trying to pull out information without sounding insensitive, but also trying to connect with him,
mm,
but also trying to keep the guidelines as a journalist, keeping myself neutral as I was hearing what NYPD did and did not do at the moment,
mm,
what kind of resources they did and did not have at the moment. And so, as a journalist there, I'm now going back to my editor. Shout out Brooks Zapelsa, incredible, incredible, not only human being, but incredible leader for LGBTQ news. And she led NBC Out and created NBC Out. But she guided me through this because I was sharing these recordings and I was also listening to myself and how I was asking these questions. And as a journalist, I was met with that tug of separating myself, remaining objective, but also wanting to let them know that I am also being affected by this story, which is
mm,
so interesting because I was doing these other stories on social media for the platform on entertainment. And at the time, maybe some policy and legislation that was being passed and being being talked about. But this one in particular, my nerves were all over the place because what had transpired was is that now I say to myself, this needs to be video because my heart is in video. This was it. I ended up doing a whole
Mhm.
written story. That's the one that really propelled the investigations, that first written piece. And then when we saw the protests happening for Julio Ramirez in Times Square, I pitched a story to the Hallie Jackson show. And then Hallie Jackson's team is, okay, cool. You're going to front it, which means you're going to get on camera, you're going to do this whole thing, and you're going to produce it with this producer. And here you go. And I'm there like, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? But I quickly just brushed that off and said, you're meeting a moment and preparedness meets opportunity. And I said, it's also Julio Ramirez's story. It's the
Mhm.
story for the Ramirez family. It's the story for our community right now. And the national platform that I have right now is my responsibility. It's my responsibility to tell that story, shake off these nerves, and get my ass up there, get on that camera, and tell the people what is happening. So I'm sitting there doing my first stand up with the crew from the network. And these guys are veterans, okay? These crew
Mhm.
members are really there, like, we've done Olympics, we've done wars, we've done everything. And I'm just like, cool, awesome. And they're like, what's this story about? And I'm just trying to focus and read my stand up because I don't have a teleprompter. I'm there,
Mhm.
top of the head. The lights are on. You got to be on. This was a pre-recorded stand-up, and not to brag, I knocked it out. I did one take, and then they were like, "Do you want one more for a buffer?" And I said, "Sure, maybe one more." They got a nice little hour break after that, and I think in my mind I was like, "You are gonna knock this out," because we then spent 2 hours driving to the family's home, the victim's
Mhm.
home, to meet with that family, and that was a different set of nerves. Doing an interview in Spanish while I speak and I write and I understand Spanish as a Spanish speaking person as well, it was still very nerve wracking because I was sitting in a place of a lot of mourning and the energy was just different. All that to wrap up that story made me super nervous because I wanted to tell it right. It was going to be on the network. It was, I would say, one of the first major opportunities on camera that I had at the network, and it was such a sensitive story. And I have never done
Mhm.
anything like that. I put that Nancy Drew hat on and I was like doing that hardcore storytelling that I'd never done before. So expectations and nerves, but the adrenaline and the family and their testimony and everything that happened after that fueled all of it. And it's all written now. And here we are today, almost 5 years later, and that story still really sits and with me as a
Mhm.
journalist and as a human. But yeah.
And I would imagine it sits with a lot of weight, right? Because you're
Mhm.
telling such a powerful story and such a personal story for that family and for that victim. And that's a lot of weight to put on someone. I don't know that
Mhm.
I could do what you do. I love this kind of storytelling and this kind of conversation. I am known
Mhm.
as the podcast crier. I think I cry on almost every episode. So some more than
Oh.
others. And sometimes after we stop camera. So I can imagine again that there is just some heavy weight that comes with telling those stories and being able to not only hold the family and hold the victim and all that comes with that. And I would imagine imposter syndrome does pop up. And I hear from some of my other friends that are journalists that it doesn't really ever go away. Does it go away for you or do you carry
No,
that with you?
oh my God, it's everywhere. Even when talking about it now, even it's my inner saboteur, right? They
Mm.
say it exists. It exists. And I think more and more with the pressures of that journalists face today, it goes
Mhm.
spikes even higher because when you're reporting this sort of news to a general audience, when I'm at the White House reporting on the polls of LGBTQ voters to doing this on ground investigative piece, you're sitting there. The general audience want to hear this? Does the network want this? Who am I? What? And it
Mhm.
clicks. No, you're supposed to be doing it. But I have to tell myself that often, or I have the conversation with my partner, somebody where you like how you said too, you got to have that dialogue. You got to go, you have to talk it out. And
Yeah.
so I do a lot of that still. I still talk about my ideas and my passions and things that scare me because that was something that scared me entirely. And so, yeah, that imposter syndrome, I'm definitely past the limit of it, but it's there. It's tiny. You just got to fight it.
That imposter is in all of us. I don't care what you do. You can be a teacher, you can be a reporter, you can be a surgeon.
It's
I don't care.
humbling. All
It's
right. It's
humbling and
humbling.
it's there.
It's good.
It's
Yeah.
humbling and it's good because I also think it keeps you human, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
allows you to, not to use a pun, investigate yourself a little bit. And
Yes,
so
Eric.
it allows you to do that. Was that good? Did I
Yeah,
pat?
that
Yeah.
was so good. Yeah.
So I've been doing what I do in my career now for almost 30 years. And there are
Mm.
moments still 30 years later that I get an opportunity and it's scary as all get out. And I'm thinking, can I do this? Do I have the capabilities? Am I smart enough? Am I this? Am I that? Am I talented enough? Do I have enough history?
Oh,
And at the end of the day, you finish and it's, oh, that wasn't so bad. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I own the company. It's not like I don't
my
have the
goodness.
background and the experience. And so, what I think is so interesting about imposter syndrome, because we actually had an
Mm.
episode about it, what I think is so interesting about imposter syndrome is, especially when it relates to something like you're doing, the story is going to get out one way or the other. It's either going to be,
Mm.
I think we're seeing that a lot today. We hear one story told one way by one reporter, the same story told by a different reporter a little bit differently. And we were talking a little bit about that before we jumped
Hmm.
on.
Yeah.
It's but why I share that is I also think that the storyteller, the reporter, if there's trust there and there's a kind of common connection with
Hmm.
you, then you become the source. You become that comfort level for that person who's listening to you to grab on to a little bit of hope, grab on to the reality
Hmm.
of that story. And I think that must come with its own weight as well. To me, that must come
Yeah.
with a little bit of responsibility that now
Hmm.
there's people relying on you and are counting on you to be that person who speaks the truth and who tells the story the way
Yeah.
that it's intended. Yeah. Is that correct?
It happened. It happened. I think again, shortly after that in-depth piece that we did on the first victim of that robbery and drugging scheme, it was like this. Okay, now we have to capture everyone's story. And so, alongside
Mhm.
the NBC Out reporter Matt Levitas, he went and gathered even testimony from other victims who the only difference from the others was that they survived, and there were
Mhm.
two deaths in this ring.
Mhm.
So I think after that, and as that was unfolding for the 2 years until leading up to their indictment and then being charged and family regrouping and saying, okay, we maybe have justice here, we have justice, they're put away. But it was then this lingering, I don't know, for me in that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, there's more. There's got to be more.
Mhm.
There is more. And so I would check my Instagram, I would check my emails, and I would see, hey, this happened to me similarly in Texas. Hey, this happened
Mhm.
to me in Los Angeles. Hey, this happened to my friend. Can I share their contact? Hey, can I do this? And then it was other stories that were coming in at that point too, because I think I had solidified a lane of the kind of stories that I was doing, and people saying, okay, I need help. Help me get my story out, because look at what
Mhm.
happened. When I feel like what I learned was that these stories were not just informing people, they were protecting people. And that
Mhm.
was something that I immediately understood, a real different responsibility than just
Mhm.
getting the story right. But also, as an openly gay man to my own community, you're sitting there, oh
Mhm.
my God, maybe your story matters too. And I believe it. And then you sit, you battle in there, you battle, and you look in a newsroom and you're like, how do I want to tell
Mhm.
everything? I want to tell everything. And that would be my ultimate goal and dream, because we all, like you said, just
Mhm.
want to be heard. I think
Mhm.
Oprah said it too. At the end of all her interviews, she would interview all these massive icons and folks. And at the end of every interview, even someone like Beyonce would say, how was
Mhm.
that? Did you get
Mhm.
everything? How was it? Another thing of wanting to be heard is what she said. They just wanted to know that you heard what they said. I
Mhm.
find that really in the heart of where I want the stories that I continue to tell to be at. I want that to continue to be the
Mhm.
beat there. People ask me what my beat is. It's the humans, it's the people, it's the
Mhm.
LGBTQ community, it's the Latino community, it's all the other marginalized community. And that's the beat I'm on. I'm on the human
Yeah.
beat, right? And I see a way of telling it that goes beyond that headline and that goes beyond the click. I think there's way more to it. And so I really do think that after feeling that responsibility, now moving forward in my next story that I do, the next platform that I contribute to, I hope that the newsrooms are receptive, and I
Mhm.
hope that I can still bring into those newsrooms.
Yeah. I think this next question could probably be its own episode. So I may need to ask you to give your Reader's Digest version because as I was thinking about it while you were talking, I'm like, oh, this may be a rabbit hole. But when you are deciding and processing and planning and creating the stories, and you know that there are so many other stories out there with just an abundance of misinformation, how do you handle that? How do you handle dealing with all that misinformation that's out there and trying to tell your story and have it be, again, like you said, seen and heard and understood and realizing that's the truth?
Wow, yeah, like you said, that can be.
Yeah, I figured
I
that was a loaded
Yeah,
question.
that's. But Eric, that is such a great question. I think really when I'm seeing that, I'm really focused on what I'm doing. I'm processing it
Mhm.
like that, but also I'm not ignoring it, because when you ignore it, you then can't squash it in your own piece. You then cannot bring in that voice and say, I had an interview with a trans service member who was being booted, and Ryan Gunderman went on camera. She's a trans woman who started recently transitioning and army captain. And I went to Hawaii to meet her and a group of trans service members who were coping and planning for their next steps after being booted out of the military. And I
Mhm.
think in that moment, I was like, I have a moment here, an opportunity to really allow these trans service members to tell their story amid the rhetoric and the chaos from the Department of War and what Hegseth had put out.
Mhm.
I ran a clip, and it was something the producer and I spoke about. I ran a clip during the interview with Ryan Gunderman, and at first I was a little like I had my thoughts about it because I didn't want to trigger anything. But what I wanted to do was show in that interview the pure reaction from Ryan Gunderman of what
Mhm.
Hegseth had said about trans
Mhm.
service members, about what he said, and I quote, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that shit, end
Mhm.
quote, right there. I ran that clip during the interview, and it reminded me of, okay, this is what y'all are putting out. This is what we're seeing. This is the noise. Let's bring the noise into this interview and let's hear a live reaction. Let's get that reaction there. But
Mhm.
also, let's show you Ryan's life. Let's show you what Ryan is going through. Let me show you what other trans service members around the country are going through. And all of that, again, it steps into, and it really just brings this humanity into the story. Someone who's watching is no longer thinking, that's just a trans person. That is a human being. That is someone
Mhm.
who served your country, who serves your country. And what you'll get from that story is not anything that us producers and reporters could have put, but their main thing was, we want to continue to serve our country, period. And that, in the moment that it was met at, where where the executive orders were being signed and the
Yeah.
Department of War had released we're going to start having these trans service members transition out, to use that word, they're transitioning them out, but losing benefits and everything. That story, my goal was to get to the core of it, which was
Mhm.
Ryan's story and the story
Mhm.
of the other veterans, trans
Mhm.
service members and veterans who were coping with this and also hearing this noise daily. I answered that, but definitely could be a whole different
Yeah.
episode.
I it reminds me in season one I interviewed. I get a lot of my inspiration. I find a lot of people like you on Instagram. As much as I
Yes.
am not a huge fan all the time, I spend a little too much time on there. But I do find some amazing humans, and yourself included. But season one, I was flipping through and I found someone that I wanted to interview. His name is Archer, and it's a trans man. Had never told his story before. I tell the story that he was posting these amazing videos. He called them thirst traps. I did not. He called them thirst
Love.
traps. And I said they're great stories with lip syncing and this really funny. And I
Mm,
did not know he was trans until I got maybe 50, 60 posts down his feed. And I
okay.
called him and I said, hey,
Yeah.
I'd love to interview you or have a conversation with you. Have you ever told your story before? And he said, no, I haven't told my story. I said, but if you'd feel comfortable, I'd love to have you on. And so he came on as a guest. I was so excited. We did an hour and 20-minute episode. And to this day, he has the number one most listened to and downloaded episode. out of all three seasons.
Wow.
And the reason I share that is because I thought at the end of the conversation that no one was going to necessarily bite into it and that it might be met with a little bit of uncomfortableness because let's face it,
Mm,
that section of our community is often misunderstood and underrepresented. And so what we started to
absolutely.
watch happen is the stories kept going and the downloads kept coming. And so I thought, I'm going to test this theory. I'm going to invite him back for number two. And it was right after the election. And I wanted to
Mm,
check in with him to see how he was feeling and how he was coping. And that episode is the number two most downloaded podcast and most
wow.
listened to episode. So I say all that because I really believe that the reason that it's done so well is because people wanted the knowledge. They wanted to hear a conversation that was based in
Yes.
someone telling their story, not someone reporting some statistic about their
Yes.
community. And I think that was the power. And I don't think, I know that was the power in that
Mhm.
story, which has then catapulted my commitment to tell as many stories as I possibly can, especially within the queer community and the trans community, because it does cause such a shift. So that story that you did, and like you said, it could
Mhm.
be multiple episodes, and maybe you'll come back someday and we can talk about it. But the
I'd love to.
misinformation,
Yeah.
yeah, the misinformation is what fuels the rhetoric and the fire
Yeah.
and all of those things that we're facing today. And again, I'll say it, I'll probably say it a couple more times before we say goodbye. I want to thank you for having the courage and the commitment to go out and to tell the stories despite the difficult potential backlash or non-running of the story. You can give me the technical terms. Sorry, I'm not that up on those.
Yeah.
And you face that fear, you face that potential, and you still go for it. So I'm wondering what, in this current climate, what is your commitment as a reporter to keep these stories going? What's on your vision board, let's say, for Jay?
Yeah, I think at this moment, right now, my commitment is prioritizing those voices that often are not prioritized in these newsrooms, on these networks, on these platforms. I think now, as I am literally off the heels of finishing my contract with NBC, seeing a world of opportunity with not only what I've been able to do, but what I can do now with the time and the resources that I have. And I see more original reporting. I see the stories that maybe folks forgot about or didn't even think to look at. I'm seeing more nods to history in my reporting because I think now we're met at a time, like you said too, that we're looking maybe at history repeat itself, but that this
Mhm.
moment in time, history has a lot to do with how we're going to understand and digest these things. And I think continuing to document these voices as a storyteller is so important. So in any capacity that I can do that moving
Mhm.
forward, I will be doing it,
Mhm.
prioritizing those voices. I didn't have a voice most of my teenage years. And I can really say that after really reflecting on that with this time I've had, I was go the last 5 years. And I've had the last 3 weeks to really sit and reflect on not only what I'm doing next, but on myself and with therapy. And it's our voices are so important. And they're like literally a look into someone's soul. And I think
Mhm.
we need to put the soul back into the stories. And I want to
Mhm.
continue to do that in any medium that is.
Mhm. I think it's really interesting. This episode is about you, so I'm not going to name names, but I've been fascinated by many reporters. I follow quite a few of them that are on major networks. Some are local, some are national, some are global, and who no longer work for those big broadcast agencies, have gone out on their own. We've seen it in some of the reporting through the chaos that we're dealing with now. And there are so many opportunities for you. And that's why I said earlier, I don't
Mm,
know necessarily what's next for you. I can't see into the future, but I definitely think that who you are and the commitment that you have for telling other people's stories so that they don't feel alone is what is going to save our community. It really is. There's someone out there sitting in some part of the country or some part of the
mm,
world that is feeling lost and feeling scared. And I know of one person in particular who's trans,
yeah.
who's afraid to leave their house
Oh
because
my
they're afraid of what's
gosh.
going to happen. And so she's not the only one. We're living in a world that is creating a lot of fear. But I really believe that there are
Mm.
opportunities for them to get connected. When you mentioned earlier about this segment of NBC News that dealt with LGBTQ stories, I didn't even know that existed. So until
Wow.
you brought it
Yeah.
up, and listen, I'm not tooting my horn.
Mm.
I'm also not putting myself down, but I know a lot of gay stuff, and I didn't know that was even a thing. So
Yes.
I think it's important that we
Yeah.
really spread the word and get the word out and
Mm.
help people know that there are opportunities for them to
Hmm.
connect. And
Yeah.
that's so important. So thank you for the work that
Yeah.
you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And to those who are listening, there are journalists like myself who are part of your community in many ways. And even when you think that your story might not be important, it is.
Mhm.
It is important. And you can help someone. It can help you by sharing your story. We've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes.
I could probably talk to you forever. We said that on our onboarding call the other
We've
day. I think
established that.
we've
You and I,
established
Eric,
that.
we need
Yes,
to meet
we're
in
we
person and really just do a digest of both of our lives. I
yeah,
enjoyed every single minute.
yeah. I always struggle because I try to be respectful of our listeners' time, and conversations like this sometimes take more than an hour. But I asked you what was next for you. I would love to ask you a personal question if you don't mind. What's next for you and your partner?
Ooh, wow. Yeah. We're celebrating 9 years in April.
Oh,
So I keep doing that estimate of we're 10 years together, we're decades together. I think right now I got a few photos of a few rings and that's never happened. So maybe down the line, we may be tying the knot. And I think right now we're just in this space now where we're getting a little bit more time together. I'm usually
mhm.
traveling a lot. And so is he. So we're getting some time in and
Good.
reflecting on what that looks like. So yeah, I'm really excited. When you
I
find
wasn't putting any
someone and in
pressure on him.
love,
Was
no,
not
but you
putting
know
any
what? The
pressure on him or
pressure's
you
been
at all.
on, Eric. It's been on for years. I had a 5 year. I had a little. I think a lot of us have timelines and different situations and relationships, and I always say after 5 years, if this ain't happening, then listen, I gotta be like, I need the ring. We need to establish this. But we're so
Hmm.
established already. I already feel married in the best way
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think we're growing. In the last
Nice.
5 years have been insane, and we've been coping with the changes. How just me traveling, him traveling too, and just really growing in the work that we do. I love that, and someone who's supportive, and he's always been number one supporter, and a part of my board members. I say that
Hmm.
sounds weird, but people who advocate for you
No,
and do
no,
that and
yeah,
want to you see you do the best that you can.
I call them my inner sanctum. It's yeah,
Ooh, wait,
yeah.
I like that one. That sounds less mine sounds super corporate-y. Like I like
No,
the inner
no,
no, I like how I
board
like
sounds
yours.
you can steal inner sanctum, but I also it's funny
Deal.
because I share a lot. I really believe in coaching. I believe in accountability partners. I
Mm,
believe that we need those people to hold us to the things that we say and that we do. So I believe in therapists and coaches and all that. But as they call them on the Real Housewives franchise, your glam squad, I call them my life squad because I would be nowhere
that
without
is so
these
good.
people. They may not do my hair, but they do me really well to keep me in line. So I think the inner sanctum is important. And I asked about your partner because I
Hmm.
also cherish love. I think it is something that's utterly amazing. And when you shared the story about how he asked you what you wanted to do, I think that's really important. It's
Hmm.
important to have someone that you can come home to at the end of the day, whether it's a friend, it'd be great if it was a partner, but a friend or someone that you can
Hmm.
share those things with. The biggest challenge for me during COVID was I had just gone through a pretty nasty and unexpected
Hmm.
divorce. And then we're all of a sudden in shutdown. And then we're trying to navigate and figure out what's happening? When's this going to
Yeah.
end? And a year and a half in, we're still alone. We're still in lockdown. We cannot be
Mm.
out seen walking on the beach. It's tough. And so I'm back
Yeah.
in this dating pool right now. And I hear all these, there's a couple walking around the resort today that just got engaged last week. And I was grilling them on all the questions. I'm like, where'd you meet? How'd you meet? Because I think it's
I've
important.
a
Because
whole
dating's
episode
a
and
whole episode. So hold on to
yes.
him because dating is tough. I've had several episodes on dating. It's tough out there
Oh,
right
it
now. It's
is
just
definite. I feel like today it's just, I don't know.
other words for it
Mm-mm.
that we won't get into today. But all right, listen, my last question, and I hope you'll come back. You're always welcome to come back and share some more stories and to share a little bit about
Thank
your
you.
journey. I'm super grateful again, like I said. But I do have one final question.
Okay.
If you could go back to that very young Jay, perhaps around the times that he was being bullied or trying to figure out who he was, what would you say to him about his life today?
Wow. I would say to him, that direct message would be keep smiling. Don't let them bring you down. Wear your hair out the way you want. Embrace yourself. You are beautiful inside and out, and you are loved, and everything will be okay. Mom loves you. Your dad loves you, and you're going to find great community. So that would be
Mm,
the direct message.
mm. That's super important. That's really powerful. That direct community or that community that you share is
Yeah.
really important. I don't think we realize it back then or when we're kids, but when we look to the future and we look and see the people around us, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to survive without them.
I
So,
would not have. And I think that every single person in your life is an experience, those that are there, those that have left, those that have that no longer walk this earth. Like, everyone is an experience. But I feel like you said earlier too, that sanctum, that glam squad, that my squad, it's so important. I didn't realize how
mhm,
important that was. So I always say, and I think that's where some could feel alone. That's how I get through every day. That's how I've gotten through some tough reporting. That's how I've gotten through some tough circumstances mentally, is the people that I was around, the community, that chosen family. So important to me. I gained so much family after coming out, and I'm so grateful for it.
mhm. One last thing I'll say before we say goodbye is you bring up a good point. And it's super powerful that there are probably people out listening and young people out there that don't feel connected. They don't feel like they have an inner sanctum or a posse or a group of people. And what they can do about it is to find that one space, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a group that's in their hometown. If they don't have that available, the internet, although we must be careful, the internet is also a
Mm,
place where they can find that community. And it's so important because they're not alone. You may think you are,
mm.
but you're not alone. There's an entire community that are out there waiting to embrace and to support and to love and to hear your story and to hear their story is really important. So, Jay, we're going to go ahead and put a way to connect with you on social media. I wish you only the best. I'm so excited to see what
Oh,
comes
thank
next
you.
for you. And we will meet soon. I can
I
feel
love
it.
that
I can
idea, and
feel
I
it.
love
Yeah.
that plan already.
I know a really good wedding planner. But I want to thank you
Noted.
again. Really thank you for your time today and thank you for sharing your story. And it's just been a delight
Thank
having you on.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. And for those who do want to follow the stories or follow my journey, I'm at the official J Valle on all platforms. Thank you.
We're going to make sure they have the link. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be in touch soon.
Bye, Eric.
Bye for now. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on today's episode. I hope our conversation resonated with you like it did me, and I cannot wait to sit down with you all again next week. Remember to subscribe to the Just You podcast on your favorite platform so you can make sure not to miss a new episode, which drop every Thursday. If you like what you hear, you can easily share the podcast and episode directly with your friends. And if you would, rate us and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can also follow us on Instagram at JustDoYouPod. As you go out back into the world today, remember to just do you. All right, talk next week.